Welcome to In the Desert of Set, a pagan and occult website by G.B. Marion. I'm G.B. Marion. I write about life as a polytheist in contemporary times with random, long-winded detours into ancient history, classic horror movies, and all kinds of other fun stuff. Won't you join me for today's adventure? If you'd like to read a free electronic print copy of the following recording, please visit desertofset.com. Understanding the Yezidis. I first learned about the Yezidis from reading Terry Hardin's Supernatural Tales from Around the World in the late 1990s. At that point, most people, including Western scholars, were still calling the Yezidis devil worshippers, and accurate information about this culture was still very hard to come by. It's only been during the past 15 years or so that the outside world has finally given the Yezidis the proper attention they deserve, but the cause for this is most unfortunate. After many centuries of persecution, the Yezidis continue to be systematically slaughtered by Islamic jihadists. They are especially despised by the Islamic State terrorist group, which has exterminated entire crowds of Yazidi men and kidnapped countless Yazidi women and children, forcing them into slavery. Yezidism is a syncretized religion that combines pre-Zoroastrian Kurdish polytheism with certain elements from the biblical faiths. It revolves around 9 theological personas, including a deistic creator god who takes little direct interest in mortal affairs, 7 archangels that serve as custodians for creation, and a holy prophet named Sheikh Adi ibn Musafir, who is believed to have been one of the 7 archangels in human form. Yezidis believe that worshipping the creator god is pointless because this entity does not actually care what happens to mortal beings. Our prayers are more productively directed toward the archangels instead, since they now rule the universe in the creator's place. Of these 7 angels, the most important is called Melek Daos, or Dausi Melek, the peacock angel. Melek Daos appears to have been a polytheist deity who was later conflated with the Islamic version of Satan, and this is where the accusation of Yazidi devil worship comes from. According to the Quran, Iblis, the Islamic Satan, whose name means doubt, was originally a genie who refused to prostrate himself before Adam per Allah's command. Iblis is said to have thought he was superior to human beings, and Allah cast him out of heaven for his insolence and pride. Afterwards, Iblis became the shaitan and devoted himself to tricking as many people into disobeying Allah as possible, so that they will go to hell. Aside from this origin story, the Islamic devil functions in much the same way as the Christian devil does. He is basically there to harass, frighten, and/or deceive monotheists into committing various sins. The Yezidis worshipped their peacock god long before they ever heard this story, but at some point attempts were made to convert them to Islam. They were told that their peacock angel is actually the shaitan, just as all polytheist deities are really Satan in monotheist eyes. Strangely, the Yezidis seem to have agreed that Melek Daos is the same person as Iblis, and they do agree that he disobeyed a direct order from the Creator by refusing to worship human beings. But this is where the resemblance between these two narratives ends. The Yezidis believe that instead of becoming the devil, Melek Daos actually became the first monotheist. He disobeyed the Creator not out of pride, but out of loyalty, for he was refusing to worship anyone else but the Creator. The Yezidis further hold that Melek Daos was rewarded for this act of disobedience, and that the Creator chose him to rule our cosmos. In this way, they justified the continued worship of their peacock angel not as the enemy of Allah, but as his regent. Sheikh Adi ibn Musafir was a medieval Sufi Muslim who traveled to Kurdistan in search of some peace and quiet. Despite his attempts to live a monastic life, he drew the attention of his new Yazidi neighbors, who seemed to have thought he was a wizard. Sheikh Adi likely tried converting the Yezidis to Islam, and he was probably one of the very few people who have ever tried to do this peacefully. As far as I've been able to trace, the idea of Iblis being the first monotheist originates from the Sufi movement, which follows a more mystical reading of Islam. I bet Sheikh Adi introduced this idea to the Yezidis, who then equated it with their own god, ItDoS. In any case, Sheikh Adi made such an impression on these people that they started to believe he was actually a human incarnation of the peacock angel. To this very day, making a pilgrimage to Sheikh Adi's tomb is still an important component of the Yazidi faith. Much of the attention Yazidism has received here in the West comes from Satanists, who often cite the religion as proof for the historicity of a pre-LaVeyan Satanism. Never mind the fact that Anton LaVey was preceded by two earlier 20th century Satanists, Maria de Neglauska and Herbert Sloan. LaVey even included part of a so-called Yezidi text, the Al-Jilwa, in his book, The Satanic Rituals, published by Avon in 1972. This text is now accepted by some theistic Satanists as a direct revelation from Lucifer himself. But its true history is far less certain. For one thing, the Al-Jilwa is only part of a longer text called the Mishaf Resh, or Black Book. And while it does reflect some Yazidi beliefs, it was not actually written by Yazidis. Back in 2007, I had an opportunity to speak about this with Dr. Philip G. Krayenbroek, one of the leading scholars of Yazidi culture today. And this is what Dr. Krayenbroek shared with me. The so-called sacred books are forgeries and have little to do with Yazidi belief. I can still remember the face of a learned Yazidi friend of mine when I showed him the sacred books. First he was scandalized, and then he laughed fit to burst. P.G. Krayenbroek, Personal Communication, October 20th, 2007. I have met theistic Satanists who believe everything in the Al-Jilwa word for word as if it were the Bible and they were fundamentalist Christians. Yet the truth is, 1. Melek Daus and Satan are two completely different figures. Number 2. Yezidis do not believe in Satan as he is defined in Christianity or Islam at all. Number 3. Yezidis consider the Al-Jilwa to be some Westerner's idea of a joke. This pretty much destroys the entire notion of using the Al-Jilwa as some kind of infallible sacred scripture. But Yazidi beliefs have also been appropriated by certain Western occult groups, including Theosophists and Thelemites. While romanticizing the Yezidis as ascendant occult masters is much better than vilifying them as devil worshippers, it is equally removed from reality. What these people have written about Yezidism really says more about Western occultists than it does about Yezidis. It's equivalent to saying,
I can't find more than a single paragraph about the Yezidis in any of my encyclopedias, and I've never actually met a Yazidi person or directly experienced their faith in any way. But since I am a Snooticus Maximus 21st degree of the Ordo As Holius Genericus, I automatically know more about Yazidism than anyone else, including those silly Yazidis. Ho 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 ho!
a much better example of how Western occult groups should treat Yazidi beliefs and culture would be the fairy tradition of traditional witchcraft. For some better information on this subject, I highly recommend checking out The Blue God of Fairy, an interview with Storm Fairy Wolf on Pathos.com. Alexander Hislop once conflated Melek Daus with Set, but my research has convinced me that this claim is false. However, I continue to feel great empathy for the Yezidis. I appreciate their unique theology, and I can identify with how frustrating it is when people think your God is evil. My heart also breaks whenever I think of all the human rights abuses the Yezidis have suffered en masse. This has been my attempt at setting the record straight about some of their beliefs, which are grossly misrepresented not only by Christians and Muslims, but also by Satanists and other Western occultists. There is nothing wrong with taking some inspiration from the Yazidi faith if people feel a calling to do so. After all, the Yazidis themselves maintain that ItDoS belongs to everyone. But if a person does take inspiration from the Yazidis, they should make every effort to understand Yazidism on its own terms, as well as to clarify that they are not actual Yazidis themselves. Since the Yezidis are an ethnic group as much as they are a religion, white people really have no business trying to include themselves in their culture. For further information about the Yezidis, I highly recommend visiting YezidiTruth.org. And if you have access to an academic library, I highly recommend Dr. Philip Krayenbroek's Yezidism in Europe, Different Generations Speak About Their Religion, published by Hubert and Company in Göttingen, Germany in 2009. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this sermon and you'd like to read some more, please check out desertofset.com. I hope you have a wonderful day. Set bless.